Welcome to this session where I'm going to be running through how to trigger on-premises Jenkins jobs with Microapps. My name is Phil Wiffen. I'm a Senior Cloud Operations Engineer at Citrix. You can follow me on Twitter at Phil_Wiffen. I'll just run through the agenda. We're going to cover some story time, like how we got here, why we built this. I'll run through an architecture overview, so just some pictures to show like how this thing works, and then we'll cover how to build it. So there's some prerequisites we'll run through, and then I'll do a demo of setting this stuff up from end to end. So we'll create the Jenkins job. We'll configure the Jenkins API so that we can call it remotely. We'll set up a Microapps Service Action, and then we'll build a Microapp with a button on it that we can click to trigger the Jenkins job. So how do we get here? I was working on a hackathon, and I was building a self-service Microapp for the Citrix Virtual Apps desktop service. We could pull in the information from CVAD and we could show it in a Microapp, but we didn't have a way to trigger requests, like log off requests, quickly. The original solution put the request into a queuing system that a Jenkins job later retrieved and then processed. Now, this was slow. It could take minutes to process a log off request. So I started to think about how could I trigger this directly, and that's what kind of led to this solution and these learnings. So I'll just cover the architecture. So what we've got here is the Microapp service on the left-hand side. That's lives in the cloud. And then on premises, we've got the Citrix Cloud Connector Appliance installed, and we've got a Jenkins instance running on a Windows VM. Now, the Citrix Connector Appliance is what enables the Microapp service to reach from the cloud into your internal network inside and then talk to Jenkins. And then the service action flow. So we've got a UI button inside Workspace that's part of the Microapps page. You can click that button. When you click that button, the Microapp service runs something called a service action. So that's an action that's performed, and we configure it so that it calls the Jenkins API, and that service action is also configured so that it reaches through the Connector Appliance to talk on premises to Jenkins. Jenkins then receives that request, and it runs the Jenkins job, and then it runs the PowerShell. In the CVAD Microapp, that PowerShell runs against CVAD and pulls things through. So let's build this thing. You'll need a number of prerequisites for this. I've included links so that you can understand how to set these up and install them yourself. You'll need Jenkins installed on Windows so that we can run PowerShell. You'll need to configure HTTPS for Jenkins so that we can securely connect to it from Microapps. This is optional if you want to build the CVAD self-service Microapp, but you'll need to install the Citrix Remote PowerShell SDK on the Jenkins machine. You'll need to set up and configure a Citrix Connector Appliance. And you'll need an instance of Citrix Workspace with Microapps. Okay, we'll do a demo now. So in this demo, I'm going to create a Jenkins build job. We're going to create a Jenkins API key. We're going to generate an authentication secret for Jenkins, which will let us call it remotely. We're going to build a Microapp, and we're going to test it end to end to make sure it works. Okay, so let's run through creating a Jenkins build job from scratch, and we'll configure it so that it can be triggered remotely. So I've logged into the Jenkins interface. If I click on new item, this will help us to create build job. I'm going to call this Converge Jenkins example. We're going to choose a freestyle project, and then we're going to click OK. Okay, so we need to give the job a description, just to help yourself or colleagues in the future understand what it does. So triggers from Microapps. For this particular example, we're not going to provide parameters, but if we were going to provide parameters for this job, we would add them here, so you can choose different kinds of parameters. So in the CVAD Remote SDK example, we use these to feed parameters in from Microapps and pull them into the job, and then the PowerShell pulls those in and does things with them. But we don't need that for this example, so I'm just going to uncheck that. What we do need to do is check the trigger builds remotely, and then we have the option of providing an authentication token. So this gives an extra layer of authorization or authentication, so that people can't just run this job remotely. There's already authentication in place because we'll be using basic authorization, which is a base 64 encoded string, to authenticate with Jenkins itself. But then we can also provide a token for this job. You're best off choosing like a random string. That string is then stored here in plain text, so you can find it later. But I'm just going to give it a really simple name for this example. Okay, and then when the build is triggered, we want to do something, right? So if we add a build step, we can choose to run some PowerShell. And for this example, we're just going to do something really basic, right? So we're just going to, let's say we'll do write host. Okay. And that's it for configuring the build. So just to go over it again, we've got a description. We've set it so that the build can be triggered remotely. You have to do that, otherwise the build can't be triggered remotely. And then we've got this URL here, which we actually do need to copy. So we'll just copy that, and then we can dump it in something like Notepad, just so we've got it to hand. So we'll just put that in there, and then we'll fill it out already. So we'll do token like that. Cool. Okay. Got our PowerShell build run. You can add additional steps. You can do more than just run some PowerShell. You might choose to run multiple PowerShell commands. It's quite powerful, these build jobs. So if I just hit save. Okay. So that's the Jenkins build job configured. We now need to add an API key, which we'll use to create the authorization header when we call Jenkins remotely. So I'm just going to click up here just to the right of the username. I'm going to go to configure, and then you can see here we've got API tokens. I'm going to create a new API token here, and we'll call it, let's just call it Converge. Oops. Jenkins demo. If I click generate, I'll be given the key, but I'm only ever shown this once, so you need to copy it. I'm just going to put it over here in Notepad because we will need that later. Okay, hit save, and the API key is there. I'll just show you quickly. You can see it's gone in there. It's never been used, and then we now can't see it, right? Like that was the only time you could view that token. Okay, so now we've got a build job created and our API token created. We now need to generate the base64 encoded string that will allow us to authenticate to Jenkins remotely. So I've got some PowerShell here in Visual Studio Code. This will be shared later. You don't need to recreate this, but we've got some variables at the top here that we need to specify. So we've got admin, and then if you remember, we took our API token, so let's grab that there, put that in. Okay, and then we need a build job token, so we imaginatively set that to be token. We've got our Jenkins build path. Now I've pre-populated this with my own Jenkins instance, but what we did earlier is we took a copy of that Jenkins build job path when we said we wanted to run it remotely. I'm just going to tack that on the end. Let's get rid of that extra /. That looks good to me. Okay, and then when we run the script, what this is doing is it's configuring the variables together into a format that Jenkins requires. So Jenkins wants the Jenkins username and the API token sort of munged together, and then it wants it converted into a base64 string. So that's what the next piece in the code does. And then we output that into the basic auth value that we're expecting, and then putting that into headers array that specifies the authorization as being the basic auth value. So we'll send that header to the Jenkins service when we run invoke web request, and that's what helps us authorize with the Jenkins service for us to be able to run the job. So let's just take that and put that into PowerShell. Okay, so I'm just going to run that. Right there. Right, there's my API key. Just going to make a copy of that and put that in here for now, because we'll need that later. We'll need to put that into the Microapp when we build it. The other thing it's fairly sensible to do is just actually make sure that we can authenticate when we're inside the same network as Jenkins. It just eliminates issues where, like, you try it in the Microapp straight away and you're not sure whether the problem is Microapps, whether the problem is, your Citrix Connector Appliance, or whether it's Jenkins itself. So if we test it now in PowerShell on the same network as the Jenkins host, we can kind of know and have confidence that it's working okay internally. So I'm just going to paste that in, and that has worked, right? So we've got a status code 201, the status description is being created, which should mean that if we go and look at Jenkins, the job should have ran. If I look at the Converge Jenkins example, we've got a build history here on the left-hand side, and we can see it's been triggered a number of times. The most recent was like a minute ago. So if we click on that number, we can see that it was started on the remote host. So that's my machine, and then it has a note of testing from internal, and that's the message that we tack on the end here, so we know what caused the build to be run. And if I look at the console output, we can see that it wrote a message out that says, "Hi, I was just triggered remotely from Microapps," which is currently a lie, but it will be true soon. So we've got those building blocks done now. Let's go and take a look at setting this stuff up in Microapps. So I've got the Microapps interface here. We're going to build one of these examples from scratch, just to run through everything. So I'm going to add an integration. I'm going to create a new HTTP integration. So I'm going to click continue there. Just so it appears at the top, I'm just going to give it an underscore, and then we're going to call it Convert Jenkins Demo. The base URL. Now, this is the URL of the Jenkins host, right? So I happen to have that already, which is here. Just going to copy that. Put that in there. Okay. Microapps now lets you choose an icon. So I've already got a Jenkins icon uploaded. So we'll put that in there. This is an on-premises instance, right? We're using the Citrix Connector Appliance to enable Microapps to reach inside the network. You'll need to specify the resource location ID here, which I have conveniently copied already. So we're just going to put that in there. When it comes to service authentication, we need to use the API keys method, and we're going to specify two different methods. The first one is the authorization header, and that's the base 64 encode that we did earlier. So the prefix for that per the Jenkins spec is basic, and then we're going to take that base 64 encoded string that we got earlier, and then we're going to put that into value. We'll then add another key, and then we're going to add a query parameter. Now this is where we specify the token for the build, and then we give it a name of token, and then our super imaginative token value there. Okay. So if I scroll up and hit add, okay, so we've added our integration. Now we need to add a service action. Now this is what will be triggered by someone clicking on a button in the Microapps interface, and this is what talks to Jenkins through the Citrix Connector Appliance. So I go to add service action. We'll give it a name, so we can call it Converge Jenkins example. For this simplified example, we don't need to specify any service action parameters, but you may do if you choose to create a button or a build job that needs to take information from Microapps, right? So perhaps you need to pass Jenkins someone's email address or someone's username. You would get that information from the Microapp, and you'd need to pass that through as a parameter in the service action. So we don't need that for this example, so I'm just going to delete that. We need to specify what the request method is. So that's post. And then we need to say where we want to send this request, right? So we've got our base URL here already. And then I've got the full path here from earlier. So we're going to call the job that's called Converge 2020 Jenkins example, and we're going to call the build function, and that's it. So I'm going to hit, if we had additional kind of complicated queries or anything, so let's say we needed to pass through like the email address or something, we could add those here, and they would then appear within the URL that's sent to Jenkins, right? So let's use an example here. So where you've got, this question mark token equals something, that might be, and email equals blah at woo.com, right? And that would then get passed through to your Jenkins job. But we don't need that. So we're going to hit add there. Okay, so that's my service action created. Now let's take a look at creating a microapp that has this button in it. So if we go to back to the integration, we're going to add a microapp. Okay, there's my microapp. We are going to go into the microapp and we'll create a page. We'll choose to add a page. And here we're being asked what the page name is, so we'll call this Jenkins build job. We have no data at the back end here, right? So we're just going to go for a static content page. Click add. Okay. This is the Microapps builder, and within that I'm going to add a button. Okay, I'm going to give it a label. Build Jenkins job. Now we need to assign an action to that button. So when it's clicked, we want it to do something. Let's go to actions. We're going to choose action. The action that we want to do is run a service action. If we expand this out, we can choose our Converge Jenkins demo, which is the integration. And then we choose the service action, which we've called Converge Jenkins example. Because we don't ask for any parameters in the service action, we don't need to set any parameters here. However, let's say this page also showed like a person's email address, and we asked for that in the service action. This is where we would do that. So we would set the parameters in there and configure that. But we don't need to do that for now. So that's it. We've built our page. Now we need to share it. So if I go back up to the blank microapp, I need to go here. So I need to add a subscription. This is where we choose who will see the microapp. I'm going to add myself. Okay. Okay, so that's subscribed me to the microapp. One thing I've forgotten to do is when I go into this microapp, I need to say that I want it to be an action. So if I go action, then the action page is the page we've just created. So that's nice and easy. I'm going to call this Jenkins build job. So that's the name of the microapp. Okay, so save those settings. Now let's take a look at Workspace. So if I go to Citrix Workspace, I just need to refresh the view. Okay, I've got my actions here. If I scroll down, then we should discover a new microapp. So we've got this microapp here called the Jenkins build job. I'm going to click on that, and it shows me a button at the bottom here called Build Jenkins Job. Now, I want to show everything that's going on here, so I'm just going to come over to the Microapps view again. We'll look at the integration, and then we're going to look at the service action. So if we go and look at the log for the service action, you'll see that so far the service action has never been triggered, which is expected. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click the button, and then we'll watch this log. and we'll watch it appear. So I'm going to just bring that over there. I'm going to click Build Jenkins job, and that's running the service action in Microapps, and that service action has now triggered a request to Jenkins. So you can see here we've got a post request that's gone in. It's got a status of 201. It's come through. It's going to the URL that we specified. So that looks okay, right? And now if we go and take a look at Jenkins, we look at the example job, we can see that like less than a minute ago we had a job trigger. And then if we look at the console, we can see, hi, I was just triggered remotely from Microapps. So that's it. We've built a Jenkins build job. We've configured it so that it will run remotely. We've configured authentication so that we can call that remotely through the Jenkins API. We've built a microapp with a button on it that triggers that build, and we've published it out to someone so that they can trigger it from Workspace. All right. That's it from me for this session. If you'd like more information about building this solution, there's a link to my personal page on the right hand side there. And then if you'd like to explore or expand on what's been done here, you can check out the building a CVAD self-service microapp at the link to the right there. Thank you very much.